I've sent investor updates for small operations where I was the only person who touched the numbers all month, and every single time the temptation is the same. Paste the table, MRR, churn, new signups, done. It feels rigorous, like you did your homework. It isn't communication, and there's a real difference between the two. One that shows up the moment someone actually reads the thing and has questions the table can't answer. I run several small businesses myself, proxy infrastructure, a couple of content sites, a phone rental service, and I'm usually the one pulling the numbers, writing the update, and hitting send, all in the same afternoon, often with no one to check my work before it goes out. Nobody hands me a finished report from a finance team, so everything I'm about to walk you through is stuff I've had to work out the hard way, sending monthly updates to people who weren't in the business every day watching the numbers move the way I was. Here's the problem with the table on its own. It tells someone what happened. It doesn't tell them why it happened, whether you expected it, or what you're planning to do about it. Data storytelling, in this context, just means adding the connective tissue between the numbers and the decisions behind them. It's not about spin, and it's not about making the numbers sound better than they actually are. It's about making them legible to someone who wasn't sitting there watching them move all month the way you were. If you run a one-person shop and you're sending updates to an angel investor, a co-founder who isn't hands-on, or even just keeping a monthly record for your own future reference, the same discipline applies. The reader needs three things from you every single time: what the number actually is, what changed it, and what you think that means for the business going forward. Leave any one of those three out and you've handed someone data, not a story, and they'll have to guess at the rest themselves, usually guessing worse than the truth would have been. Now, where do you start the update? It's tempting to open with a story, something like, "This was a tough month because," and only back it up with the actual numbers later. I'd flip that around completely. Lead with the figure, then explain it. If MRR moved from $4,000 to $4,300, say that first, plainly, before you get into the why behind it. People who are used to reviewing numbers scan for the figure before they ever read your explanation, and if they have to go hunting for it buried inside a paragraph, they'll start assuming you're hiding something, even when you're not. This matters even more when the number is bad. If churn ticked up, put the churn number in the first sentence of that section, then explain it. I've seen founders wrap a bad number in 3 or 4 sentences of throat clearing before they finally get to it, and it reads as evasive every time, even when that's not remotely what they meant. Now let's get into the metrics themselves, because this is the part that's easiest to skip and honestly the most important part to include. Every metric in a business update is a proxy for something you actually care about, and every proxy has a blind spot somewhere, a place where the number and the reality it's supposed to represent can quietly come apart. Take MRR, it tells you recurring revenue booked this month, full stop. It does not tell you whether that revenue is fragile, a handful of large accounts that could all leave around the same time and take a big chunk of it with them, or durable, spread thin across many small accounts where losing any one of them barely moves the number. If your update just says MRR grew, an investor has no way of knowing which kind of growth that actually was unless you spell it out for them plainly in your own words right there in the update. Churn tells you how many customers or how much revenue walked out the door this period. It does not tell you why, and it flattens very different situations into one identical looking number. A customer who left because your product genuinely let them down looks exactly the same in the churn figure as one who left because their own business closed and they simply didn't need you anymore. If you know the reason, say it. And if you genuinely don't know the reason for most of this month's churn, say that too. "We don't have clear attribution on this month's churn yet" is a more honest and more useful sentence than saying nothing at all and hoping nobody asks. CLV, Customer Lifetime Value, is a projection built on assumptions about how long customers stick around and what they spend during that time. It's a modeled estimate, not something you actually went out and observed happening. If your CLV number jumps around a lot in one update, tell the reader plainly whether that's because customer behavior actually changed or because you went in and adjusted the assumptions sitting inside the model. Those are two very different explanations, and they point toward two very different conclusions about the health of the business. Conversion rate tells you what fraction of a defined group did the thing you were measuring, nothing more. It says nothing about the size of that group and nothing about whether that group even represents the market you're actually trying to reach. A conversion rate can climb because your funnel genuinely improved, or it can climb because a low-intent traffic source dried up and left only your best qualified visitors behind in the count. Those two very different situations can produce the exact same top-line number, and the reader can't tell which one they're looking at unless you say so. None of this means the metrics themselves are useless, and I'm not arguing you should stop tracking them. It means the number by itself is not the finding. The context sitting around that number is the actual finding and is the part most updates skip entirely. Same logic applies to cohort analysis and to a /B tests. If you're citing a cohort comparison in an update, be precise about what it actually showed. It tells you how one group of customers who all started at the same time behaved over the following weeks or month compared against another group that started at a different time. That's genuinely useful for spotting whether retention is trending better or worse across different sign-up periods. It is not proof of what caused the difference unless you can rule out everything else that changed at the same time. A pricing change, a different acquisition channel, a seasonal swing in demand that had nothing to do with your product at all. A /B tests work the same way. A test showing one version beating another is evidence, and how much weight that evidence carries depends heavily on how much traffic actually ran through it and how long it ran for. A test with a small sample or a short runtime can show a difference that just doesn't hold up once more data comes in over the following weeks. If you're reporting a test result in an update, include roughly how much traffic and over what period so the reader can judge the weight of it for themselves instead of you asserting the conclusion as already settled. I try to write these sections the way I'd want to read them if someone else were sending me the update. Tell me the result, tell me how confident you actually are in it, and tell me what would change your mind about it. Attribution deserves a caveat every single time, no exceptions. If you're reporting where signups or revenue actually came from, say plainly how you're attributing it, first touch, last touch, or something else entirely, because the exact same customer journey can produce very different looking numbers depending purely on which model you happen to use. If two channels both get credit for the same customer, or one channel gets none at all because of how the tracking happens to be set up, then a line like "Channel X drove most of our growth" is handing the reader more confidence than your data can actually support. A short caveat like "This is last touch attribution, so channels earlier in the journey are undercounted" costs you one sentence and saves the reader from trusting a number that has a known specific blind spot. Data quality is part of the story too, not a footnote stuck at the bottom that nobody ever reads. If a number in your update is touched by a tracking gap, a migration, a change in how you define a metric, or missing data for part of the period, put that explanation in the main text where people will actually see it. MRR growth this month includes a one-time correction for a billing error we found back in March. Is a completely normal, honest sentence to write. Investors who've been burned before by a founder, quietly restating numbers months later, care a lot more about a track record of flagging this stuff up front than about the update looking perfectly clean and tidy on the surface. Where do AI tools actually help with any of this? For a one-person business, they're genuinely useful for the mechanical parts of the job, pulling last month's numbers into a consistent format, drafting a first pass of the narrative sections from your own rough notes, checking that you use the same metric definitions as last time so you're not accidentally comparing apples to oranges. What they can't do is know which of your caveats actually matter to a reader, or notice on their own that this month's churn number is inflated because of a billing glitch you never got around to mentioning to it. Treat anything AI drafts as a starting point you fact-check line by line against your own source data, never as a finished update ready to send as is. The judgment calls, what to flag, what to caveat, what you're genuinely unsure about, still have to come from you and nobody else. Keep the format boring and consistent, month after month. The best updates I've seen, and the ones I try to write myself, use the exact same structure every single time. Headline metrics up top, a short plain explanation under each one, a section for whatever's still uncertain or unresolved, and a short list of what you're actually doing next. Consistency lets a reader compare this month to last month without relearning your layout from scratch, and it makes it a lot harder to quietly bury a bad number inside a reorganized report. That structure, on its own, is its own kind of honesty. None of this replaces your own judgment about your business, and it's not a substitute for an actual conversation with the people reading your update if something significant is genuinely going on. It's just a way of making sure the numbers you send out are doing an honest job of representing what you actually know and admitting plainly what you don't know yet. Every one of these explainers lives in writing at dataresearchanalysiscollection.com, the whole metric library in plain English. Every metric explained in writing at dataresearchanalysiscollection.com. So go have a look and subscribe if this is the kind of thing you want more of.